ICQ Podcast episode 483, Fault Finding. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to episode 483 of your ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by Peter Weston, 2E0 Delta Echo Delta, and of course our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature, we look at fault finding. Well, as always, it's your very kind support and donations that keep us advert free, and along with our wonderful monthly and subscription donors, we'd also like to thank Peter Weston, 2E0 Delta Echo Delta, for his one-off donations. And he said he's just recently found the ICQ podcast, but planned to be a long-term listener. Many thanks for all your hard work. So, Peter, many thanks for your very kind words. We really do appreciate that. What we always ask for is if you find value in your ICQ podcast, we work on a very simple principle of the value for value model. You decide what it's worth to you, and you go to icqpodcast.com/donate and say turn that value into a monetary amount where you send our way, and we use all those donations for our running costs and keeping your ICQ podcast show advert free. So please do consider us, as I say, as you find value from today's show. I'd also like to remind you all that our next Digital Talk Group Net is coming up soon. It's going to be on Saturday the 6th of June, and will run between 1200 UTC and 1600 UTC. So make sure you have that marked in your diaries, for our next round of the Digital Talk Group. Right now we're going to join Martin, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including STEM on and off air and Morse code operators needed for Cubesat decoding. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 483 of the ICQ podcast and tonight's news roundtable. For that episode tonight, I'm joined by Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everyone. It is good to be back.
Yeah, good to have you back. And as I say, I don't know if you've had interesting weather where you are, but I know Ed and I have, and I'm sure Edmund has. So it's been a bit interesting. Moving over to Germany, we've got Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. And to those who are listening to this as it's released and are at Xenia, please have a safe journey home.
Yeah, as I say, unfortunately we're not there this year, but it's always an interesting event. Back over to my side of the world, and about 50 miles from me, is Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you. And as I say, we've had some interesting weather. I expect you've had it on the south coast as well.
Yep, we've gone from bright sunshine to dark clouds, rain and hail, and then back to bright sunshine all in the space of a few minutes.
Yep, sounds pretty much what we've had here. So, been interesting, put it that way. Right. First news story, STEM on and off the air. Now, I know the presenters know what STEM is, but STEM is science, technology, engineering and maths. And for anybody who's at school or whatever, this is now the buzzword, school and colleges STEM. And I think amateur radio fits brilliantly within that model. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yep, can do. By the way, there's an extension to STEM called STEAM that has the A for arts in there as well in some schools. Yeah, this is an article we've got here about a short TV coverage of a radio club at a school on Long Island, New York. Interestingly enough, it was CBS News in Chicago who covered it, but it actually gives quite a nice short overview of an amateur radio club in a school and the fact that, it's still, amateur radio is still around. So it's a good bit of PR for the hobby, and actually quite nicely done. Not too long, not too detailed, and the kids seem to be having a lot of fun in the video. So we've got the link to the to where the video is, where you can watch it in the show notes. It's worth a watch. It's not that long, maybe 5 minutes or so. So good on the school called the Garden School Amateur Radio Club in Jackson Heights, and more success to them. Apparently they've over the years have got 100 new people licensed through that amateur radio club, so it's been around a while and it's still going strong. It would be nice if a lot more school radio clubs, not just in the US but in the whole world, were a bit more active or still going. But unfortunately, we tend to have to report on the exception where it's good, as opposed to it being the norm. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as I say, STEM is a great thing, and it's great there's education in schools. Caryn, this isn't a million miles from where you live, is it? What do you think?
Oh, I have been to Jackson Heights many, many times. Great restaurants. Wonderful. I've got a few friends who live there as well. This is one of the so-called outer boroughs of New York City. And when I worked in the city, that was one of the neighborhoods I covered. What's really nice about this is not a university ham radio club. A lot of, U.S. universities do have ham radio clubs, but this is reaching kids at a younger age. It's remarkable and refreshing that the very young are embracing this. I think it captures their imagination, which is a difficult thing to do nowadays because, my goodness, there's so much to capture any young person's imagination. Video games and AI and computers, anything technical like that. And we know ham radio has been around, predates all of that. So the kids are very taken in by this, and I think that's a credit to ham radio and what it's all about. The Teachers Institute is very proactive in supporting and nurturing these ham radio clubs in these schools, and is also helping the teachers to bring these students along and get them licensed and get them active in doing things. I notice here there is a component here where Field Day, which is coming up fast, ARRL Field Day is next month. Imagine these kids are going to be part of that. Well, I know I experienced my first Field Day as a newly licensed ham as a, relatively speaking, let's say a grown-up. And there's nothing more exciting than your first field day. You're among colleagues, you're among fellow hams, and you're reaching out to the world. And hey, if that can get an adult excited, imagine what it can do for a kid. My guess is if they do get to participate in Field Day, they're going to be hooked. And I think that's fantastic. So I'm excited to see this, even though, as I say, there are schools that do have ham radio clubs. This school shows tremendous promise, and so does the club. I'm happy to see that it was featured, and I hope more people will watch the video. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as you say, STEM's great, and for children, absolutely brilliant. Edmund, I know this is a US story, but I would have loved to have had this go on at school when I was at school. What about yourself?
Yep, the same. And the video's well worth a watch. It's only a couple of minutes long, and I was able to watch it from here in the UK, so it's not geo-blocked to the United States only. And if you want to find out more about the school, if you go to the QRZ.com page for their school radio station, Kilo 2 Golf Sierra Golf, there's lots of information about the school and hyperlinks directly to the school's website on there as well. And it was very heartening to hear one of the young people interviewed in the video to say that he felt that amateur radio had helped him, not just in terms of going on the air, but in his life outside of on the air. It's increased his confidence when speaking to other people. So a good news story all round, Martin.
Yeah, certainly was. And just to go off a little bit of a tangent, because Caryn mentioned Field Day. In the UK, we have SSB Field Day, usually in September, first weekend in September. And going back a number of years, probably about 10 years ago, we were operating and we had some 14-year-olds who were members of the club, and they'd come as a group and they were quite happy. They were camping away. But they wanted to do the night shifts, which is fine. And I remember one of them had this big brown bear onesie, and he tips up at midnight to take his turn in this big brown bear onesie suit. Put it this way, the two operators were on at the time nearly had a heart attack until they realised it was him. Oh dear. But all being aside, yeah, youngsters do enjoy amateur radio, and it is a great help for education going forward. There's so many things in amateur radio that cross into all the other things you learn at school. Right, move to our next news story, and I'm going to get Caryn to go first on this one. Award recognises Dxpeditions with remote operation. This is not turning up and having about 50 people turn up in a place and operate. This is remote operation, isn't it, Caryn?
Yeah, this is remote operations. You know, I need to preface my comments with a confession, and I'll say it was a confession out of ignorance. I used to think remote operations were cheating. I didn't think very highly of them, and I'm sorry, because I have revised my thoughts on that. So I apologize if anyone is offended by that revelation. I see where they really do have a purpose. There are more and more Dxpeditions are featuring them for a variety of very, very valid reasons. And some of them have even been honored by some organizations for their innovation and for the way they have run and organized their Dxpedition. There's one in particular was the PJ 6Y Youth Dxpedition. Now there were young operators on an island there. They were on the island, but not everybody was on the island. They had the remote activators as well. Now, I don't know if I were a young person activating remotely rather than being on the island. I don't know if I'd feel cheated. I don't know if I would say, well, gee, I'd rather be on the island. That's a real Dxpedition. But the point is that the transmitter is where the Dxpedition is. And so, yes, you are in effect transmitting from the site. You're just not physically there. Valid reason for it, of course, more and more of these very coveted DX entities are environmentally sensitive. And a lot of the governments or those overseeing the islands are concerned about the vegetation, are concerned about the wildlife. Even the expeditioners who are very careful about not leaving a footprint. Things happen. I mean, the very fact that people are there does somehow tip the balance. So this is the reality. I accept it. I think it's a good thing, and I'm glad we have the technology for it. So good on them. I think we're going to be seeing so much more of this, and it's being done well. So that counts for a lot too. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I would say we don't want to damage the environment. Edmund, I know you like special event stations and probably do try to work some of these DX, but what do you think? Are they cheating by not being there?
Well, I can see both sides of this one, Martin. I'm not a DXer and I'm not a DX chaser, so I don't have any vested interest. I mean, yes, clearly, if the two choices are remote operation or nothing at all, for environmental reasons, for example, then I would say go with remote operation. But just to give you an example, last weekend just gone was Mills on the Air. So I trudged up to a local windmill and carried a load of equipment up there, antennas, transmitters and all, and spoke to quite a few other windmills. Now, if when I got home I discovered that I'd thought I'd made a contact with a particular windmill, but in fact there was just a transmitter and an antenna there, but the person I was speaking to was sitting on a deck chair in his back garden, for example, talking over the internet or what have you. I don't know if I would go as far as describing that as cheating, but I think it would take, in terms of how it felt, I think it would take the edge off, if I'm completely honest. And there's also a practical consideration, which is if you're operating remotely, what happens if your link goes down or the SWR on your antenna suddenly goes through the roof? If you are somewhere a mile or many miles away, you can't instantly remedy that. So I wouldn't tell anybody not to do it, but it's not something that I would do personally, Martin.
Yeah, understood. And I'm sorry I didn't get to help you with your windmills on the air or mills on the air this weekend. Last weekend I was unfortunately busy. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Okay, well, we probably need to split 2 points here. Specifically, we're talking here about radios in a box, RIABs, used on Dxpeditions, which can be a very good idea for environmental reasons. Rather have something there. It is often relevant to islands because the Dxpeditions often go to islands, and you could have the radios in a box put on the island and then operated from a boat off the coast. To me, that is the people are there and you're doing it for environmental reasons. Where it becomes a grey area is where people pay to be able to operate those radios in a box from their home location, wherever else in the world, over the internet, over the satellites, etc. That, to me, isn't really kosher. It's one of these things where you say, they want to do it that way. We can't stop them. However, there's something that some of these Dxpedition groups need to think about as a major blockage, and that is licensing. To operate a station remotely, whether it's a radio in a box or whether it's one of these pay for a remote station operation of a superstation from your home PC, if you do not hold a license for the country where that transmitter is located, you may not be able to operate it legally. Some countries allow it, but as far as I understand, the majority do not. The reciprocal arrangements, and especially the CEPT, which is the one we often use, specifically excludes remote operation. It's not allowed. You have to have a license from the country where the transmitter is. So, for example, if you were to remotely control and operate a transmitter from the Bouvet Dxpedition, you would require a Norwegian Callsign, a Norwegian license. That's the way I read it in any case, and I believe that was what was done. Now, whether a Norwegian club Callsign with members that are from other countries gets around the law, I'm not sure, but it is a major issue that hasn't been clarified. Obviously, in external territories of the US operators can operate there. That's not an issue. But there are certain remote locations in the world where this could be a stop for them. Now, obviously, if they are the people who spend literally thousands or tens of thousands of their own money to physically go there, they would get the call sign that's required, etc., etc. But if it's just somebody who is sponsoring the Dxpedition and wanting to operate remotely, they may not be so keen on taking another exam or even just doing a paper application to get a call sign to allow them to operate. So that could be a question. In a lot of cases also, these radios in a box, specifically for the point that Edmund made, these are usually not high-powered kilowatt stations. They are usually maybe 100 watt and can stand an antenna falling down, can auto restart if something goes wrong, can shut down if the link disappears, etc., etc. So that side of it is basically taken care of. Yeah, that's less of a problem. Obviously, if these stations, like the major, pay a subscription to use Superstation, they have a lot of money invested in safety measures for SWR problems, operator problems, system problems. Yeah, it's the future is remote operating, but I don't think we're completely there yet. I think there's a certain amount needs to be done in regulations, perhaps even at an ITU level, to make it simpler for somebody to operate a remote station without having to get a new license. And yeah, technology is pretty well there. I mean, because the other thing with a 100-watt station, you can solar power it with a battery. You don't need generators, and you don't want to be putting generators onto some of these sensitive islands. So a few technical questions still, a few legal questions still, but in principle, I personally don't find it a bad thing. But I think the person operating should be required to announce that they are operating remotely, and then people who do not wish to work them because they are remote from the island can choose not to call them. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think the three of you have made some very, very good points on this one. And yeah, it's some of the things will be down to the operator or the personal preference. So there's a lot of good comment here, and probably enough to generate discussion with amongst your colleagues and friends at the club. Move to our next news story, and I'm going to give this one to Ed again because he has greater knowledge in this area. But the WIA asks for changes to Sub-Antarctic callsign prefixes. Ed, you said this was done a year ago and now it's raised its head again. Over to you.
Yep. Okay. So the WIA is one of the two representative bodies in Australia for amateur radio. It is the one that is a member of the IARU or reports to the IARU. The regulator, the ACMA in Australia, changed. It might be a bit more than a year ago, but anyway, it's some time ago. Changed or said they were going to, and then brought in the changes and changed some of the call sign prefixes for stations operating from certain locations. In Australia, each state has a number in the call sign. So, for example, New South Wales is VK2, Queensland is VK4, Tasmania VK7, and so on. There are also, however, external territories. These are usually islands, and they are not large enough to be a state, but then they're all grouped together under the VK9 call sign. In addition to that, we have Antarctica, which is a different continent, not just a different state, and that has VK0. For some time, and for many years, several of the sub-Antarctic islands were issued call signs that started VK0. And what's happened is the ACMA has come along and said, no, those are external territories, or the same as external territories. They need to be VK9. We'll change it to VK9. So stations actually really on Antarctica at the Australian Arctic bases are still VK0, but some of the sub-Antarctic islands are now VK9 when they were VK0 previously. So from an amateur radio point of view, they're not as attractive to operate from. But, the rules are there. Another prime example that upset a lot of people was Lord Howe Island. Lord Howe Island is off the east coast of Australia. It is ruled by the New South Wales government and is therefore part of New South Wales. It was, up until the last set of changes, given a VK9 prefix as an external territory, but it isn't legally an external territory. It's actually part of New South Wales. So now that's a VK2. And of course, people listening across the band go, oh, it's another VK2 station. Yeah, right. Whereas somebody hearing a VK9 is more likely to stop and want to call you. This is my understanding from the other side of the world. Of course, people know I lived in Australia for 18 years, but, my details here are probably not 100% correct. Check the website and the links that are in the show notes. But in principle, this was all done by the regulator, and, the regulator sets the rules some time ago. And now we've got the WIA coming back and saying, we want you to change it back to how it was, because our amateurs want to have those numbers in the call signs. I can't see it being changed back personally. The regulator put the effort in to tidy up what was mistakes from years, what they thought, and I believe as well, were mistakes made many years ago. So I can't see them actually, the ACMA, changing back to what is being asked for. Yeah, that's life, guys. If you're on Macquarie Island or somewhere, it's now VK9, not VK0. I think that's correct. If you're on Lord Howe Island, it's VK2, not VK9. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Yeah, it's maybe a little bit less attractive call sign, but you're still on a remote island. And hopefully, if you go there to get contacts, this relates back to the Dxpedition point we had in the last item. If you go in there and people know you're operating from there, then it is somewhere special. Hopefully you get the contacts you wish. Back to Martin.
Yeah, a long but very informative speech from you, Ed. I mean, I usually only ever work VK2 or VK6 for some reason, but that's via our digital talk group, so say, not knock it. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, that's a very comprehensive explanation, Ed, and I don't really have anything to add that's specific to the VK stations, but I have an observation just in general about the changing of numerals within prefixes, within call signs, just a general statement in any country, really. The United States, here, you don't know who you're working anymore, because a California call sign one you might associate with. You can get a 6 for the West Coast, or further north, you can get a 7, and you get all excited if you're here on the East Coast in New York. Oh my God, they gave me in my case, a 599 if it's a CW contact, and you find out they're in Virginia. So I think these numerals are very important, but it's no longer a reference point for anybody. When I'm out doing POTA and I get, say I'm doing 10 watts and I get what appears to be a West Coast station or even the Pacific Northwest station, and I find out they're I'm in New York and they're in Ohio or Pennsylvania. I'm happy to have them in the log, don't get me wrong, but it's misleading. So I don't know how I feel about changing numerals for the sake of that. So that really is more the general issue. But thank you, Ed, for that explanation, which does make total sense. So that's it for me. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, interesting, Caryn, and interesting. I know the states you have numbers for different areas, and I'm an extremely bad boy for that because I have a US call sign, but I have a vanity call sign, and I wanted something that began with W, and I didn't want 0, and at the time 0 or 9 came up, and I chose W9. So I don't live in the 9 area at all. And I think it's actually registered at Dan's. Well, my registered address in the US is in Dan's address, and that's a 7 area. But I'm a W9 in the 7 area. So I've screwed it up for you, Caryn. Sorry. But there you go. Edmund, any thoughts on this one?
Well, if it wasn't immediately obvious from your call sign that you were somewhere rare or desirable, I would think you would only need to actually state your location a couple of times to get people calling you. So there you go, problem solved, he said rather flippantly.
I don't know so much about that, but it was an interesting one. As I say, I won't go into today about why I didn't want W0. There's nothing wrong with the 0 location. It was just a little ragging that used to happen between me and another guy years ago. And as I say, just a funny one along the lines. Right, move to our next news story. And CW Ops needed to copy data from Tokyo-built Cubesat. Now, that's another nice story of us amateurs being asked to get involved with things. And Caryn, you put this one in, so I'm going to let you go first on this one. What do you think?
Well, obviously, anything involving CW and CW operators, I'm going to enjoy reading about because it recognizes how important CW is. But the greater thing with this story is that even if a project is not necessarily ham radio related, hams are being asked to engage in some way with it. This is a CubeSat that was built in Tokyo by the Sakamoto Laboratory, and it's called Arica 2. Its mission is to collect images of the Earth and aurora, and it makes use of machine learning. It has a number of missions up there having to do with astronomy. But hams are being asked to copy data, sent it 20 words a minute, which is very reasonable. It's being sent, if anybody would like to try, by the way, it's being sent at 436.830 megahertz, if you're game to try that. CubeSat has been up there. It was launched in late April from New Zealand, so it's going to be up there a bit. And I think recognizing that hams can make a contribution to a project like this that has other missions is showing a great deal of respect for amateur radio. Look at Artemis 2. Hams were asked to passively receive data during the first, during the test of that. And I think NASA recognized that hams could make a contribution there. So any engagement of hams, be it the government asking for involvement, be it a laboratory asking for involvement, is a very, very good thing. We are still relevant. Don't forget that. We're here. We're not going anywhere. and we will do our part when we're asked. We're very happy to volunteer. So I was delighted to see that this Cubesat was looking for some ham involvement, and we'll see where it goes from there. I think the next step is posting things on the AMSAT bulletin board and on the social media platform X, so people can keep track of what's going on. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And the X is that new name for Twitter that's been around for probably about 5 years now, but I still call it Twitter. No problems, Caryn. Edmund, I mean, I know this is an interesting story of getting CW ops, and I know you're trying to improve your CW at the moment. Could be interesting. And, I mean, it sounds a bit of fun. I don't know what you think.
I wonder what they will be transmitting at 20 words per minute in CW, presumably a call sign, but I wonder if there'll be other information in there as well. So if you want to have a go at receiving this, set your filter to as wide as possible and tune on the high side of the frequency as the satellite's coming towards you. So the notional frequency, as Caryn said, is 436.830. So start at 436.840 to allow for Doppler shift, and then go lower in frequency as the satellite comes towards you. And if your experience of Doppler shift has been receiving things from the International Space Station in the 2 meter band on 145.800, then when you're on 70 centimeters, the Doppler shift, the speed of it and the amount of it can be of a whole different order, and you may end up as low as 436.820 by the time the satellite goes down beneath the horizon. So I haven't got a turnstile antenna or anything like that. I do have a collinear, and although that's not quite so good, if the satellite is directly above you, or almost directly above you, if the satellite is low on the horizon, that can work very well. So I will certainly keep an ear out for this one, partly because, as I mentioned a moment ago, I'll be interested to see exactly what is being sent at 20 words a minute in CW. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all on that one. So, be interesting. Ed, I mean, this is interesting that they're asking amateur radio operators again to help with a project. There's got to be good news, hasn't it?
Yeah. I wanted to say that this is certainly not the first time we've been asked to do this. If my memory serves me correctly, which who knows, it may or may not, the first landing of anything on the rear side of the moon, which happened, I think, maybe 2 years ago, 18 months ago, that was from the Chinese space company or organization, and they had help from some radio amateurs in Spain and Germany in tracking and data transfer, etc. So it's not just the US, it's not just the Japanese groups that are coming to amateur radio and asking for help. China as well, and I believe India as well. There are amateurs involved. So, good. As Caryn was saying, it's a sign of respect that there are specialists in the world that don't, aren't employed by the space industry, but can certainly assist the space industry. And in this particular case, gathering data from the satellite is probably fairly straightforward for people who already track satellites. And I was trying to find the link again. I had a link here where actually it shows, I think it's off the link that is in the show notes. It actually shows what data is going to be sent between the Morse code sections or in Morse code. So that might answer your question, Edmund. And yeah, when I mentioned Macquarie Island before in the last item, I actually meant Heard Island, but I think it applies to both, but that's a separate story. As always, please check the notes and the links in the in the show notes, because then you'll get the real information. And yeah, in this case, good on the people who are able to help. And I believe that's only going to be happening for another few days. Is it until the 20th or something? So by the time this show comes out, if you do want to help, better get to that website and register and see what you can do to help. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, on that one, that's a good one. Well, I think, as we've had 2 stories today with children getting involved in amateur radio, and space seems to be the one that excites a lot of the general public. And I think by knowing about these events happening, we can talk to wax lyrically, in fact, to the general public and get their interest that they can get involved with some of this. Now, right, it costs a few pennies, but it doesn't have to be an absolute fortune either. So, could be quite interesting. Moving to our last news story, and Edmund and I will probably be crying into our coffee on the 27th of June 2026, because closure of BBC Radio 4 on longwave. End of an era, Edmund, isn't it?
Well, it was always inevitable that it was going to happen, and there have been a couple of stays of execution already. But in my opinion, this is totally the wrong decision. If I was trying to explain to somebody who didn't have English as their first language what the saying, "We know the cost of everything but the value of nothing," meant, then this would be a ready-made example. And I am one of the very small group, probably, who still does regularly listen to Radio 4 on longwave, partly because I think it sounds very, very nice. Amplitude modulation can sound fantastic if it's done right, and the audio processing on the longwave signal is superb, particularly for speech radio. And Radio 4, although they occasionally broadcast a program or documentary relating to music, and very good programs at that, nevertheless, Radio 4 is 95%, if not slightly more than that, speech, and that is very well suited to longwave. I think one of the reasons I've got such a soft spot for it is that it was Radio 4 longwave that allowed me to first discover broadcast radio in the early 90s. When I was in my very early teens, I didn't really follow the news or current affairs, and I wasn't particularly up on popular culture, but I remember as clear as yesterday sitting in the kitchen of my late grandmother's bungalow, and she had a Philips transistor radio that I think she had bought in the 1960s, and it was still in regular use and going strong in the early 90s. And it was one Saturday, and the news came on, and they were talking about this famous person, and the name didn't mean anything to me at all, but it was obvious that whoever this guy was, he was very important and a major figure in his line of work. And they said words to the effect of, it had been announced pretty much out of the blue that he was seriously, seriously ill. And I thought, okay, my ears pricked up. And I think I'm right in saying that it was the very next day, the Sunday. I don't think it was even 1 week later. I think it was literally 24 hours later. I was sitting in the same room, same news bulletin at 1 o'clock, and it was announced that this person, who they'd been talking about the day before, had sadly died. And the person in question was Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen. And obviously I know far more about him now than I did at the time, but that really, really sort of burnt an image into my memory. It was the first time that I'd ever heard anything where I thought to myself, this is historically important, and years from now I will remember it. And I did. Well, even today I do remember it. So that was where the love affair, I suppose, with long wave started. And I've still got that little transistor radio upstairs somewhere. Only covers long wave and medium wave, no VHF, FM on it, that kind of thing. And then later in the 90s, I lived in northeast France for a year, and Radio 4 long wave was the only domestic signal out of the UK that I could listen to easily. Radio 5 Live on 909 and 693 kilohertz medium wave came in at night sometimes if I was lucky, but it was weak and it wasn't really listenable. So Radio 4 was the way that I stayed in touch with what was going on at home. It was listening to that one morning that I heard the tragic news sort of in real time that Jill Dando had been assassinated. For those of you who in the UK who remember that, there have been other occasions where I've been driving in continental Europe and I was able to listen to Radio 4 long after I'd gone across the border into Germany. So it's kind of Britain's presence on the air, the soft power, quote unquote, that we possibly still yield. And yes, it is true that it's old technology, that the valves in the transmitter they've got are probably at the end of their life, but you can still buy long wave transmitters. I think Nortel is just one company that still makes them. And even if the BBC went out and bought the Rolls Royce of long wave transmitters and did a complete maintenance overhaul of the Droitwich transmitting station, whether it needed it or not, and even if they bumped the power back up to 500 kilowatts, which it was traditionally, I think these days it trundles along at about 250 kilowatts, so obviously there's a saving there on the electricity, and a new, modern, more efficient transmitter would use less electricity anyway. But even if they did all of those things, the amount it would cost to the likes of me and Martin and everybody on the podcast, it would be a fortune, yes. But when viewed through the lens of the overall budget of the BBC, it would be a rounding error, if that. So it would not be expensive in the grand scheme of things, really. And given the way the world is going, I think it's more likely now that the brown stuff is going to hit the fan more so than at pretty much any other time in my life that I can remember. Droitwich is basically a transmitter that will cover the entire nation. And yeah, okay, there are some parts of the UK where reception would not be strong. But if we were in a real sort of emergency situation, you wouldn't need entertainment broadcast quality. You would just need something that you could listen to get a message out to the population. And yeah, okay, lots of people don't own radios that cover long wave anymore, but if we were in a disaster crisis situation, I bet that there are loads and loads of old radios that have been sitting in cupboards and drawers gathering dust for years or decades that would suddenly, be taken out of the drawers and cupboards and have batteries put into them. So I think by shutting this service off at a time when potentially it could be extremely useful to the population in a disaster situation, I think is very short-sighted. So I'll be sad to see it go. And the BBC Amateur Radio Group and the RSGB apparently are going to be doing something on the air to mark the occasion. The RSGB website invites people, members only presumably, although don't quote me on that, the website invites people to contact the RSGB if they want to be involved in whatever it is that is being planned. So, given that I am a diehard listener, I have contacted them, and I will be taking part probably in whatever it is that is going to happen. How's that for a bit of reckless abandon? I've signed myself up for something and I don't even know what I've signed myself up to yet. So, yes, I know you said slightly tongue-in-cheek, Martin, about crying into our coffee, but the 27th of June at 1 o'clock in the morning BST will certainly be a very, very sad and regrettable and erroneous, in my opinion, moment, and I will certainly mark its passing with sadness. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I knew you'd get emotional about this one. Ed, when you lived in the UK, you must have listened to Radio 4. It was one of our mainstays, wasn't it?
Well, you youngsters, I mean, come on. Droitwich was one of the stations I listened to as a shortwave listener as a child, and that was then the Light programme, which became Radio 2. Radio 4 only came along a lot later. Radio 4 came along, let's see, when was it?
1967, and it then went on to 67 was when the home service turned into Radio 4, and Radio 4 went...
It launched in 1967, BBC Radio 2, when it took over from the Light programme.
Yeah, and Radio 4 the home service became Radio 4 Ed. So there used to be the Light programme. No, the home service became Radio 4 in the 1967. So pre-1967, you had the Light programme, which became Radio 2.
Yes.
Radio 1 was a brand new station in 67.
Yeah. That was after the Pirates.
And the third programme became Radio 3.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. In any case, yes, I do know the Droitwich frequency. Was it 200 kilohertz and then moved to 198? Yeah, but it originally was 1,500 meters on the dial. And yeah, I do remember that from my childhood. The question I would have is, depending on what the RSGB and the BBC Amateur Radio Club are thinking to do, it would be nice for them to put something on at 2,200 meters on the amateur band. Although I believe that is that only data and CW, you can't run audio there. It's certainly limited power anyway. But it would be nice to put something on a VLF band because, in respect for this. So 137 kilohertz rather than 200 kilohertz. But in any case, it's got a lot of history. I'm wondering if Compass Media could actually power up on 200 kilohertz. They've certainly got a lot of gear there, but I suspect what's the costing behind closing down Droitwich is probably to sell the land for people to build things on. So, even though you might say, well, yeah, you could do a renovation of the station to bring it up to current standards and all the rest of it. Yeah, and that's not a big cost. The point is they're losing the millions that they might get, or whatever the number is they'll get for selling the land for other purposes. So, having that kind of coverage covering not just the UK, as you say, Edmund, covering into well into Europe and probably elsewhere in the world. I'm wondering if Compass Media could do that. Compass Media run the other big power shortwave stations out of the UK, but I don't know if they actually have anything on longwave. Antenna would be a problem, of course. But yeah, it's a shame it's going. It's been talked about for years and years and years. It's done well to last as long as it has. It's reflected also in the medium wave stations going as well. Short-sighted, perhaps, but when your audience goes away and goes on to just listen to everything on the internet and think the internet will never go down, you've lost your audience, you've lost your finances in many ways. Sad, but that's where we are, I think. I will still think of it as being the light program. Then, whatever it changed its name to over the years, to me, Droitwich was always the light program. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems, Ed. And as I say, Caryn, I know you live in the state, but we're waxing lyrically about very important
please,
stuff.
this listening to Edmund, I'm really truly overcome with sadness because I do love broadcast history. I mean, my experience of listening to BBC, to be honest, is Sirius XM BBC World Service Radio, and of course, a Times radio. Okay, so I'm not, I didn't come up as a listener, but I know broadcasting, radio weaves itself through our lives as we grow up. Radio, for many of us, is in the very fiber of who we are. Look what we become radio amateurs because we love radio. It speaks to us, and it is part of who we've become. Nobody says a business decision is necessarily a smart decision, but it clearly is a business decision. At least that's how it seemed to me. I love the fact that some things, though, are preserved when it is either financially possible or maybe sometimes not financially possible. And I think of the Grimeton radio station in Sweden. I'm not comparing that to BBC, but I just want to mention it because that is long wave, and that transmitter is seriously old. I mean, it's 100, I believe, 101 years old now, SAQ, and it is fired up a couple of times a year, specifically for CW transmission on long wave. No, we're maybe mixing apples and oranges here, and I understand that this isn't BBC, but what they have in common is that lovely history that speaks to so many of us. I know there are a lot of listeners who are hearing this program who know they grew up with radio, and anytime a transmitter goes off, anytime a tower is taken down, it speaks to us. It's very, very sad. I will never know what Edmund personally experienced, but I certainly understand it, and I can feel for it because I think it is the wrong decision. You know, here I am listening over satellite to the BBC, but I get it. I totally get it, and I'm sorry for it. Well, amateur radio will honor these transmitters, and that's a good thing. And amateur radio and broadcasting have almost always been hand in hand as sympathetic souls to one another. So I will be listening for those stations when the special event goes on the air, and hoping for the best. Back to you, Martin.
It certainly is, Caryn, and a lot of very brought back memories for all of us. My memory, back in the 80s, I was a field service engineer. Pretty much England was my territory. I was a 100,000 mile a year driver, and be honest with you, after you've listened to the top 40 3 or 4 times, you get bored. And I used to tune over to Radio 4 on long wave, and there'd be interesting programs, and I'd hear things and think, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. And it was quite strange because later in life, I'd be sitting with my mother, and we'd be watching, say, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And a question would come up, and I'd get the answer, and Mum would look at me and say, how did you know that? And it was like, it was quite an educational thing without having it rammed down your throat. So I listened to lots of programs on Radio 4 while I was in the car, and it entertained me. So I will miss it as well. Right, that concludes our news stories for this episode. Let's find out what the team have been up to since the last time we spoke. Ladies first, so over to you, Caryn.
Okay, I'll begin with 4 letters. I'll begin with POTA. POTA. We're back. It is now okay to be outside with one's radio and to transmit and to fill that log. So I've been doing that, trying to make up for lost time, having a great time again. And I love my 891, but right now the KX2 is a wonderful grab and go for impromptu POTA. So we're back to doing that, and I'm promising myself this season to not go to the tried and true parks, but to try and expand my universe and try some new parks where it's possible. The only other thing I've got on the calendar now, and I don't want to steal the thunder of a feature you have coming up, which I'm not sure when it's scheduled for, but is the football on the air. I'm New York, New Jersey administrator for one of the 16 special event stations in North America that will be getting on the air when the World Cup games begin next month. And the 16 stations will be operating right through to the end. Each city's team will be getting on game day. So we're not doing this nonstop every day, but each city will activate their team when the game is going on. So that's exciting, and looking forward to that. And I will be immediately no rest for the weary. I will be immediately making a segue from that to 13 Colonies, where I am a one of the New York colony activators. So we've got that happening, and down the horizon we have Dog Day, but we've got plenty of time to wait for August to come. So basically we're in the throes of organizing for that. And in the meantime, the weather's held. It's been a little chilly and a little windy, but that's okay. That's what overcoats were made for. And I'm going out to the park. That's where I'm going, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, sounds fun, Caryn. Sounds extreme fun. So enjoy your operating out there. Ed, what have you been doing over in Germany? I know you weren't with us last time because you had a holiday, but hope all went well. And what you've been up to radio-wise?
Yeah, well, thanks for the good wishes on the holiday. Yeah, 5-day holiday, of which 2 days were pouring with rain. But, well, that's what happens in April, of course. Yeah, well, I'll start my text to steal something from Caryn here with 5 letters. PLOTA, parking lots on the air, which is what I call it when I park in a parking area within a park. So it's really POTA, but I like to call it PLOTA. Done several of those since last time I was on, probably about 5 different places. But today, I actually got out this morning and did a proper POTA, actually away from the car, walk probably 350, 400 metres into the park, set up and operated on 20 and 40 metres sideband, worked, 23 stations in about an hour, and then packed up and left just before the rain started. So, yeah, actually, it's good to actually get out of the car and into the park. So, as Caryn was saying, the summer season is coming. I hope to fit in a couple of SOTA and HEMA activations in the next few weeks, all being well, and then we'll see where we go from there. Apart from that, I'm still quite busy editing a couple of books, and bit of a spoiler here, my first book that I've written is actually on its way to the printers at the moment. So maybe give some more information about that once it's actually released. Yeah, the usual experimenting with antennas, changing things around and finding I've done things wrong and learning from it with the different antenna setups. And I've also done a couple of activations with my little 5-watt G106 radio, which I'm starting to like more and more at the moment. Very, very simple radio. And thing is there, it's lightweight, so that can go with one of the antenna systems that I've now got working well with it, and probably head off as summer comes in properly on the bicycle, and go bicycle to some small hilltops around here and get some more operating in and see how we go from that. So lightweight compared to the probably between 14 and 15 kilo heavy rucksack that I had on my back today to go in and do a full-blown activation. Yeah, that's about it from me. We'll see what whether the weather settles down, and we've been having mixed weather here in Germany, like you've been having in the UK. So hopefully, when the Ice Heiliger, so the holy ice angels, are gone this week, we might actually get into summer proper. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, you missed one thing though, Ed. You and I had a contact yesterday on the talk.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll come back in on that one. The last couple of digital group meetups I haven't been able to make because my hotspot broke down. I eventually managed to find a replacement Raspberry Pi board for it of exactly the same model of what I had previously. And it took me the complete afternoon yesterday to reconfigure everything because it's so long since I did it. But that's all working again now. So I think 6th of June is the next one where I'll try and be on with some more of the on the group. So I'm happy that I'm back on DMR and into the ICQ Digital Talk group. And my first test call, who came back to it? Martin. I really appreciate that. Yep, so all good on that front as well.
Yeah, I'd say I just wanted to mention you were on the talk group and you've got it fixed now, so that's good, Ed. Edmund, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke on the podcast?
Well, I've been listening to Radio 4 on Longwave, and I did that on Monday, just gone, before I knew that the official closure date had been announced. And very late in the evening, they broadcast an episode of the series Soul Music. Now, this is a program that's been running for nearly a quarter of a century, and it is an absolutely superb series. So if you can receive Radio 4, and if you like any kind of music, I can't recommend it highly enough. And the episode I listened to was dedicated to the song Fire and Rain by James Taylor, which is a song I have a great deal of affection for in any case, lyrically and musically. And I'll tell you what, in good old-fashioned amplitude modulation with some valves at Droitwich and my Sangean ATS-909 receiver, to say it sounded rather nice would have been the understatement of the week. So see if you can catch any episodes of that in AM while Droitwich is still on air. And incidentally, we talk about Droitwich. There are two other transmitters, both in Scotland, one at Westerglen and one at Birkhead at 50 kilowatts apiece, that are also on 198 kilohertz, 15 meters long wave. Both of those are closing on the same date. It's not just Droitwich, it's all three of them, sadly. In terms of amateur radio, Mills on the Air took place the weekend prior to release of this podcast. I walked up to a windmill that's never taken part in Mills on the Air before. That's Haneker Windmill near Chichester. And I wanted to activate it because this year was the 30th anniversary of Mills on the Air, having started in 1996. I only went up there on the Saturday, partly because that's when good weather was forecast, and as it happened, it was also the better day propagation-wise of the two as well. A couple of things worthy of note. I had 45 contacts altogether in the few hours that I was up there. The first dozen were all using 2 meters FM simplex, so if anybody tells you the band is dead, don't believe them. But every contact came about because I called CQ. I didn't hear anybody else calling CQs. So it's the licensed listener syndrome again, I think. So that was good. And also, the other thing worthy of note, I took my Zygu X6100, which is 10 watt on an external battery. I don't think that power level was a major disadvantage. Most people who I tried calling came back to me either on the first go or the second go. There were a couple of windmills that I called and didn't manage to work, but they were running quite big pile-ups, so even if I'd had 100 watts available, I'm far from convinced that they would have heard me even then. And last but not least, I've got the R1 CBU software on there, the latest version, and as long as the time is accurate, and you can do that by connecting an external GPS antenna, the built-in FT8 transmitter and decoder does work, and the proof of that one is that I managed to have 2 FT8 contacts with 2 different windmills. I have been planning to use CW, but I lightweighted out of that one. I chickened out of that one, probably mainly because propagation was so good compared to how it had been in the days leading up to it that I didn't run out of stations to work on SSB. If the band had been all but deserted, then I most certainly would have had a go at calling CW, but because there were so many SSB signals on there, I never ran out of people to work. So my CW is okay. There's still a lot of room for improvement, so I'm going to carry on studying that and practicing that every day and week and month, and hopefully one of these days I'll crack it. Other than that, though, I don't think there's anything much to report on the amateur radio front. I'm not involved in any special event stations in the very near future, although, as I say, I've basically signed myself up to do something with the RSGB relating to the closure of 198 kilohertz, but I don't know what I've signed myself up to. So if it involves being on the air from home on 40 meters, you might hear me on the bands doing that. But if it involves actually physically going up there, being somewhere close to the transmitter, then I probably won't. So yes, it's basically listening to Radio 4 long wave while it lasts and practicing CW. That's on the agenda for the weeks ahead, Martin.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. You've been busy. Right, quickly, what have I been up to? Well, last weekend I was at the repair cafe while you was at the windmill. No, not radio related. I did look at a valve radio for a guy and give him an estimate of what needed repair doing. But it was not a job to be done at the repair cafe, and he decided not to progress with it because there's quite a lot of work needed doing. But I did fix a couple of vacuum cleaners, and I did fix a toaster and the people were absolutely happy. I spent some time in the shack on 4 meters and 2 meters and 70 sems and the talk group. So I've been operating it a little bit, had quite a nice contact on 4 meters, which set me a problem initially. I made a powered speaker for my QMX Plus, and it's never buzzed or anything, but 70 megs the RF managed to get into it, and it was buzzing horribly. So found it, put a couple of ferrites, one on the audio lead, one on the power lead, and it's as quiet as anything now. But bearing in mind, this is one that I've sort of put together. It's not a commercial one. I also some time ago, I bought a second-hand BHI speaker, and I had problems when I couldn't find the right power plug. It was a bit intermittent, my one, or the socket was a bit intermittent. So I took my BHI speaker apart and fitted a new socket, and I've got a plug that fits the socket now. So that was managed to get that to work. So I was pleased with that, and I found out how to get the BHI speaker apart. Graham, if you're listening, I'm a naughty boy, I know, for Graham from BHI. What else? Oh, I had bought some time ago one of these 17-foot telescopic whips you can buy from the Chinese places, and you have a stake goes in the ground, a little red connector with an SO239 on it, and at the spike end that goes into the ground, there's some ground plane wires that run out. They're not that good, but they would have been okay if it had been manufactured properly. I had problems setting it up. Turns out that when they crimped the leads to the connector, they didn't strip the insulation off, so they crimped the insulation. So I've made a new ground plane for that, and that works much better. Last two things, guys, please listen. For those of you who used to get announcements from me on Facebook, and lots of amateur radio people have asked me to join their group, and are really happy with me posting on Facebook what the ICQ podcast is doing. I got banned from Facebook the other week, so I'm unable to push out as much as I used to through the Facebook. I still put it out on the ICQ stuff and the club stuff, but if you're not receiving any information from me on Facebook, it's because I can't send it anymore. Otherwise, they'll ban me again. So what I'm going to say to you is sign up to the ICQ podcast newsletter, and then you'll find out what's going on, because I can't send this stuff out to you anymore. And last but not least, and I think Ed mentioned this, June the 6th is our next digital talk group net, and it starts at 12 UTC and runs through till 1600 UTC. So it's a bit more civilized for us guys in the UK, and a sensible time for anybody in the States. Bit late for the guys down in Australia and New Zealand, but they're welcome to join as well if they wish to. So that's what I've been up to. Right, all that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys for turning up, and we need to move to the next part of the podcast. I'd like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's always fun, Martin.
I try to make it fun. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M1MRB.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, great to have you. And last but not least, Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Martin. Always fun.
Yeah. And unfortunately, our Mr. Dan Romacek, who I did mention at the beginning, KB6NU, is actually driving to Dayton while recording this, and I know he's doing a presentation there, so hopefully we'll find out more next time we speak to him. Right? So all I need to do now is say 73, so we'll move to the next part of the podcast. 73, guys.
73.
73.
73.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. News here that Walt Hudson, Kilo 4, Oscar Golf Oscar, more commonly known as Salty Walt, has produced the next version of his very popular book, and it's going to be entitled Salty Walt's Next Level Portable Antenna Sketchbook. So the first book was very well received across the board, and as I say, he's made now his second edition available, and it's available from all your usual outlets, your national associations, etc. And as I say, it's going to be a great opportunity to share Walt's passion for antennas and AM radio. He says there's 17 projects in this new book, ranging from relatively simple builds such as a 3-element Yagi and a square and a half square antenna to more sophisticated designs including portable rhomboics, bobtail curtains and co-phased vertical arrays. So certainly something for everybody in this book, no matter your level there. So certainly say keep an eye out for that. Talking about books, friend of the parish, Mr. Dan Romacek, KB6NU, has released his updated version of his no-nonsense technician class study guide, which is available now. So you can go to his website, which we'll put on the ICQ podcast webpage for you to download it, and you can read through and give Dan your comments, etc. He's also added some illustrations, and we continue to work on them and to continue to improve not only the text itself but the explanations that Dan gives you to help you pass your technician exam in the US. So say we'll be popping a link to that for you on the ICQ podcast webpage for you. News here that a ex-user managed to trick the AI bot Grok into sending around $200,000 worth of cryptocurrency after exploiting a link using an automated trading bot. Now, part of that allowed him to use Morse code to send instructions to trigger this transfer, and that bypassed various safeguards, triggering the transfer, say, of about $200,000 worth. So, say, an interesting story, unfortunately, of part of our hobby being used, as I say, for unfair activities. But, say, news there that, say, you can trick an AI bot potentially with Morse code. One for your diary here, 8th of August is Cat Pick on the Air Day, and as I obviously know, the internet was made for sharing funny cat pictures, so what better way of doing it, get hams to celebrate this day by using Slow Scan TV to send those cat pictures for you. So say we got all the details for you, it'll be on the ICQ podcast webpage for you, and you can book in the date of the 8th of August to send your favourite funny cat picture. Right, now we're going to head over to our features episode, and this episode's feature is fault finding. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hi guys, for this episode's feature, I want to talk about fault finding. Now, the reason I want to talk about fault finding is during our survey, a number of you asked for a discussion on fault finding. Now, this is going to be a subset of a presentation I've done to a number of clubs. And unfortunately, because it's very visual in places, you're not going to get the whole presentation here tonight. However, if you want to talk to me about it, or you find it on the internet, I'm more than happy to have a look at it. The tips bit you're not probably going to see, or too many of them. But there's enough good content, I hope, that will keep you interested. So first thing is, I'm a practical person, a fixer rather than a designer. I've lots of these tips and bits and pieces have come from years gained in the radio and TV, as well as the computer industry. Now, one caveat here is any advice or tips given here are given in the spirit of amateur radio. It's your responsibility to work safely and not to undertake projects you feel are outside of your skill set. Anything you do at your own risk. And I want to make that really clear, because if you're not sure, don't do it, because I'd rather talk to you another day in one piece. So, fault finding. Well, we've all done a bit of fault finding, not only in radio but other things. Fault finding is often a state of mind, and I'll take you through what I mean about that shortly. KISS, you may have heard, which stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. Not kids. Keep it difficult, stupid. Well, the Reverend George Dobbs came up with that one, and I like that. Too many people try and make things too difficult. The other thing is, don't prejudge a problem before you actually get to work on it, or to get involved trying to find the fault. You know, it's often very easy to go, well, I'm never going to fix that, so I'm not going to bother. Many moons ago, when I was a radio TV engineer, field service TV engineer, just as colour was making it big into the UK, at that point in time, my training hadn't made it in as far as colour TV. But I was a pretty reasonable black and white TV engineer. And I went out with a number of calls, and you'd always look at your call before you go out. And I had two calls that stuck in my mind. A black and white TV with no sound, and a colour TV with no colour. And I thought, I panicked all day about the colour TV. The black and white TV I thought would be a walk in the park. But when I got there, it wasn't something obvious. It was a fault in the IF, which I had to unfortunately put in the back of the car and bring it back to the workshop. So a fault that I should have been able to fix easy because I was thinking it's an audio output stage problem, wasn't. The colour TV with no colour, back in the day in the 70s, they had a colour control, a knob on the front of the TV. I walked into the house and turned the colour knob up, and there was the colour. So you can put yourself off, or you can prejudge something and, miss the obvious. So, as I said, have an open mind. Also, have a good look round before you start doing anything. Is there any physical damage? Are there any burnt components or components that look stressed because they've changed in colour or bulges in the top of electrolytics, those sort of things? Not necessarily radio TV, but are there any error codes? When you boot something up, does it come up with an error code? Sometimes radios do. You then can quickly look up the error code and find out roughly where the fault might be. Another option is listen to what the user tells you. Now, that's what I cannot emphasise enough from my days of being a service engineer. A customer will not be able to tell you or I exactly what the fault is in the technical language that you and I understand. They will tell you exactly what went on if you ask them nicely, and it's up to you to determine what they said. And you can quiz them and ask them more questions. They will be helpful. But if you listen, they're obviously more helpful to you as well. So things like, did the device make any noise when it went faulty? Is there any arcing? Another one is if it's something with a hard disk in, are the hard disks spinning up and completing their diagnostics? Well, that's an easy one to do, because if you have a screwdriver and you put it on the case of the hard drive and you put your ear against it, obviously the ear against the plastic end, the handle, you should be able to hear the hard disk start up and go through its diagnostics. If you hear it smashing against the end stop, then you know you've got a hard disk problem. Silly little things like that. Are motors working or making a noise? Any hums and pops from the loudspeaker? That's another one. Moving further on, have a good sniff round. Is there any smell of burning? It can be obvious. You open it up and you go, yeah, there's something definitely wrong in here. Another one is look at log sheets. Not only your stuff in your house or your radio, but if you're working on other things, often devices have log sheets and engineers have filled in and told you what they've done. Very, very worth looking into. So, any log sheets is certainly a good one. Is there any service history on the device? Yeah. And as I say, also, you can sometimes find stock faults. Let's be honest, when I was a TV engineer, I wouldn't have completed 12 calls a day in the field if there weren't for stock faults that you saw over and over again. So, if it's something you're not used to, have a look on the internet and see if there's any stock faults for that device. Now, fault finding. Man-made faults are much, much harder to find than a failure because they don't obey any logic. If somebody's rewired something or put a wrong component in or put it round the wrong way, it's not obvious. So that's another one worth looking out for. Look for signs of other repairs or modifications. If there's a modification, why was it done? Why did we need that modification? Or is it just to get round something that somebody couldn't find? I've come across a number of those in my time. You can always ask for help from other people and often help will be given. However, don't expect them to do the work for you. Moving on, as I say, man-made faults, terrible things to come up against. Okay, using a circuit. Circuits and manuals are often available on the internet these days. If you've got a computer scanner, you can enlarge certain parts of the circuit that you're really interested in. As I mentioned, stop faults being repaired, and that's another way of checking on the internet. Now, I remember, as a silly by the by, a circuit diagram. I was in a gentleman's house, and I was the third engineer to go and fix this problem. And I've got the circuit diagram out in them days for a big colour TV. And the colour TV I was working on, the circuit diagram, certain areas of the printed circuit, the diagram were coloured. So the line time base, I think, was in red. The frame time base was in yellow. The colour was in green. The colour panel was in green, etc. And power supply in blue or whatever. And I was working away, and I actually fixed his telly and got it working properly in the house. But he phoned up the head office and complained that the engineer came round and got his comics out. So, you can't always win, but it happens. But that was another one. So, remember, one of the most things is with high voltage, remember, a fuse is there to protect the equipment, not you. I would always suggest try working one-handed when you're working on high voltage, because you want to keep the voltage, if you get a shock, from going through your heart. If you have your hand touching the chassis and you touch something hot, you'll get a shock which will probably stop your heart. So be very careful here. If possible, use an isolating transformer and a current limiter, or maybe even a variac, but they're not all the same thing. Okay, coming on to this, a current limiter is effectively a way of dropping some voltage and reducing the current into a device. Now, the good old-fashioned incandescent light bulbs that everybody's throwing away at the moment, please don't. They're very useful to you. If you put a light bulb in series with the live connector, and you can put a switch across it, you can make them up. When you power up, if the device has got a short circuit on it, the light bulb will glow absolutely bright. If the device hasn't got a short, it will be a little bit of light from the bulb, but not much, because it is not overdrawing a lot of current. So something like a 100-watt light bulb, or 60 or 100-watt light bulb, is quite useful to put in series with the live connector. It does reduce the power, the mains power, onto your device, but it's a safety method. You don't want to have a bonfire go off. If there's a major short circuit, then the bulb, say, will light up, and you'll be okay. Now, isolating transformers. Well, the idea of an isolating transformer is to completely isolate you from the mains. So you have a primary winding on the transformer and a secondary, and the earth should not be connected through to the secondary socket. When you put a socket on, and I've seen so many of these devices that have come in that the earth has been just taken across, which negates what you're trying to do. You're trying to isolate the whole thing. So the object is, if you get a shock, you don't get shocked down to earth. A variac is not an isolating transformer. A variac is not an isolation transformer. The object to a variac is to bring the mains voltage up slowly. So you've got a big control, and you adjust it, and you bring the voltage up. Now, they do come in certain ratings. You need one powerful enough. If you're going to use a variac, you need one powerful enough for the amount of current that's being drawn. But the simple idea is your current limiter would help the most. Now, what sort of test gear do we need? Well, in fairness, I would always say there's a number of, if you're going to fault find, there's a number of test things you need. Multimeters, and I say meters because an analog meter and a digital meter are very useful. a power supply, audio generator, RF generator if you're doing radio stuff, the RF probe for your multimeter, that's another one, a simple audio amplifier and speakers. Now, these come up at radio rallies as a set of old computer speakers. Hey, that works just as well. The oscilloscope can be very, very useful for you. And once again, they come up at radio rallies. Now, just because it's a 20 megahertz bandwidth oscilloscope doesn't mean to say it's useless. It might be dirt cheap at a rally. It will measure higher than that. It's just the circuit is out of calibration above 20 megahertz. But then, if it's an old oscilloscope at the rally anyway, it's already out of calibration. And, having the right scope probe certainly helps. But if you just need to see what's going on in a circuit, then you don't need to spend a fortune on an oscilloscope. If you're getting serious at this, the oscilloscope is certainly worth having. And last but not least, in the tools I think you ought to have, build yourself a capacitance discharger. Now, if you short out an electrolytic that's charged up, say, through 300 volts, there'll be a big flash, there'll be a dark mark on the bit of metal or the screwdriver blade you did it with. But it doesn't do a lot of good to the capacitor. It might save you getting a shock, which is more important, but it doesn't do a lot of good. So what you do need to do is build yourself a capacitor discharger, which is normally a big resistor that you put across, and you can measure the voltage across it, or some of them have indicators to say the voltage has disappeared. So little things like that are quite useful. So I'm going to bypass the tips part, which I normally talk about to a lot of clubs when I do this talk for clubs. We'll go to the most likely faults you're going to get. In fairness, on old valve equipment, if it's an old piece of valve equipment, you really ought to change the electrolytics. They could die. If they look okay, they're probably going to die very, very soon. Wax capacitors, these are capacitors that are usually wax coated. Anything that's of that type of capacitor where you've got two plates of metal and they've put a piece of paper between the two plates and rolled them up. 40 years ago, they were perfectly okay. Today they leak DC voltage across them because the paper's gone acidic and become a resistor. So it's like having a resistor in parallel with the capacitor. And for valve circuits, you can have a major problem by wrongly biasing a valve and damaging all sorts of other components when that happens. Resistors changing in value. Certain types change worse than others, but you can quickly measure them to see if they're within spec. Heater cathode short circuits, sometimes caused hum, so you spend ages looking for a hum and it's a heater cathode fault. Clean switches and controls. But lastly, and absolutely lastly, remember, alignment is the last thing you do. Don't go in and start twiddling everything with a screwdriver before you've fixed everything else. And as I said, this is old valve equipment. The equipment is running on a very high voltage. Working on these, you do so at your own risk. Coming on to the more likely low voltage stuff, once again, the faults you'll most likely find. Electrolytic capacitors. Now, they tend to have a thing called ESR, which is an effective serial resistance. So there's like a resistor in series with them, rather than a leaky paper capacitor, which has got a resistor across it, effectively. Tantalum capacitors, while good, because they don't cause any inductance in your circuit and often found around RF stages, very, very often go short circuit. And if they're across a power supply line, they go up in smoke and you'll get a big cloud of smoke and you'll panic. It might just be a tantalum capacitor that's giving up the ghost. Once again, resistors can change in value, checking interconnecting leads. Dead semiconductors, sometimes, but not high on the list. Semiconductors don't often fail first. It'll be another component that took them down. Clean switches and controls. And as I said last time, lastly, you do an alignment. Once you fix the thing, and if you need to do the alignment, do it. So I know this is a short quickie from what I do when I do a club talk. Hopefully it was of interest. And if you decide you want me to do it in a club, I can't guarantee I can. But if you would like me to do it online at a club, ask first. If I can do it, I will. So I hope this was of interest.
Well, everybody, I really hope you've enjoyed our features episode on fault finding. It's always one of the topics that I know gets a lot of feedback from everybody. So feel free to contact us via the usual channels or by the Contact Us page on the ICQ Podcast website. And we'd really be appreciated to hear, your feedback on the episode. And while you're there, really do consider showing the value you found from today's show by visiting our donation page at ICQPodcast.com/donate. Where, as I say, you can show your value that you received from the ICQ podcast today and send a donation our way, which is exactly what our monthly subscription donors do, along with Peter Weston 2E0 Delta Echo Delta. So please do consider us, as I say, when you visit the website. We also would like to point you in the direction of our next Digital Talk Group Net, taking place on the 6th of June. And say all the details for that is available on ICQPodcast.com. So say book it in your diary, guys. If you need information about how to get connected, it's all there for you on the website. But if you need any extra help, reach out to us and we'll certainly work on that for you and get that information for you. Right, well, that just wraps up episode 483 of your ICQ Amateur Radio podcast. We really do appreciate your support and listening as always, and continue to enjoy the hobby, and we'll catch up again in a fortnight's time. 73's all.